In this clip, we're going to go ahead and start sculpting our rock. So let's go ahead and load our rock into the scene. So I'm going to go into here and click import. And let's go ahead and find where our rock is at. It'll be in files, OBJs. Here we go. Let's bring that in. So here we got the rock that we modeled in 3ds Max, and we can go ahead and start sculpting it out. So before we go anywhere, let me just hide this here. What we want to do is Dynamesh it. So I have the Dynamesh here in Geometry, Dynamesh, and if you feel more comfortable, because we do use Dynamesh quite often, you can of course customize it and put it somewhere on UI. So with Dynamesh, it's a little bit tricky because you have all these resolutions, and sometimes you can overdo it, sometimes you can underdo it. So usually I would start with 128 and see what result it gives me. So as you can see, it's super low res, so it's a little bit too low res for me. So let's go ahead and try 124 here. Here we go. So we got 2 million polygons here. Maybe a little bit too much, so let's go ahead and bring that down. So Control Z that. And let's try 512. That should do just fine. And that is perfect. So now everything is joined into one mesh. So we can go ahead and start sculpting. So I'm going to start with using the AJ polish here. And I'm going to hold Shift. And I'm going to select the planar brush. And make sure that the intensity is a little bit lower. So about 30. And I'm going to go ahead and start just polishing this out. So I'm just going to try and get all these shapes in. So I'm going to break the sharp edges a little bit. And just trying to get all of this cleaned up a little bit here. Bring a little bit here. One thing I want to do is want to make sure that it's all flat on the bottom. So I'm just going to hold Shift Control and select Clip Curve. And then hold Shift Control and just flatten this bottom out here. Really help. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to get all of these shapes out. So if you hold Control and just drag it outside the scene, you will re-Dynamesh so that you get it all fresh. So the idea is right now is just to polish it out, clean it up a little bit, get a nice shapes out of it. So using the planar brush here and the AJ polish brush. Really slowly but surely getting to our target here. So I'm trying to break all the sharp corners. I don't want this rock to be too geometrical. The concept I drew perhaps a little bit too much. So when you work with stylized stuff, there's a lot of different styles. There's very stylized where shapes are extremely flat. There's sort of more detailed. There's sort of realistic stylized stuff. So we're trying to go for a mid stylized here. So it's going to be quite flat, but still have a little bit of detail in there. Going in there and breaking all of these shapes up. Holding Alt. I want everything to make sense. I want it to look like a standard rock. I don't want it to look like a bunch of squares combined together, basically. Bring those in here. And I'm not too worried about my messy workflow right now, because first step is to get the shape right there, and then after that you can go in and sort of clean it up a little bit, get it a little bit cleaner. So I'm just going to clean this up here. Looks pretty good. You can always use the orb, a flattened brush as well. That works almost the same as the planar brush, but it's a little bit more adaptive, so it's quite useful. So you can get that to clean up the necessary mess here. We're just going to go ahead and work on this side, and then you can of course go ahead and work on the back on yourself. Flatten here a little bit. So again, I'm just trying to get it, give it a nice shape, nice and smooth, but in the same time keep that stylized look to it. So I don't like this corner over here. I'm just going to go in and flatten it out a little bit. And now I'm starting to notice there's too many sharp connections. So I'm going to go in and select H polish here, and holding Alt, just going to make it a little bit rounder here. Same here. I want it to look a little bit more natural. I don't want it to look like things are connected together. So I'm just going to go in here and just bring it in a little bit. You can also use the smooth valleys. Let's redynamize that a little bit. So that's a little bit better. I'm going to use the H polish again and just going to start bringing those shapes back in. So I don't want it to look too soft, so I'm going to sort of use it as a bevel here. So a little bit more. I'm going to use planar. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I get the shape I like. That's pretty much most of the work. So getting the shape is very important. So whenever you working on rocks, you want to make sure that the shape is there. Now rocks seem to be like the most easiest thing to make, but it's actually one of the hardest because there's no defined shape to it. There's no defined look to it. It can be anything. And sometimes if you would, say, model a rock from real life in a stylized form, it wouldn't really look good. So what you have to do is work on that silhouette, give it nice breakups. You don't want it to look too round, too uniform. You want to give it some character. So it takes a while and takes a lot of practice, and it definitely takes a lot of rocks until you really master that craft here. I've been making rocks for years now on Fable and on other games, and I'm still practicing, still learning new things every time, and it's a challenge every time I get onto it because there's always these different breeds of rocks, different kinds of rocks, so you really want to practice a lot, try and do different kinds of rocks until you can really master that. That's really getting there. I kind of like the way it looks here. I'm just trying to get that shape. Put a little bit more bevel here, a little bit more here. And, learning how to sculpt these sort of smaller boulders, smaller rocks would really help in achieving sort of better cliffs, better mountain sculpting, and that's sort of something we're going to be doing in the next module. That's why I decided to start with a rock, because there's a really good practice before we handle bigger shapes. It's starting to really look good. I really like that. And again, I'm not too worried about the mess at this point. I'm just trying to get the shape right. I don't like the way the tops are. There's a little bit too little detail here. So I'm going to go in and use the clay brush. Let's do the clay buildup. Actually, let's use clay orb. And just gonna hold Alt and create this little cavity here. And then select the planar brush again. And just gonna do a little crevice here. It's pretty cool. Let's do one more over here. Same idea. Let's do it a little bit deeper. Again, it's a lot of trial and error. Sometimes you would sculpt something for a couple hours, and then you would decide that you want to come back and do it all again because you just didn't go the right direction. So I'm just gonna do these kind of crevices here. These really help. And now I'm going to select the orbs flatten brush and just gonna go in and get them nice and flat. It looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of start cleaning this up and getting it a little bit more shape definition. And in the next clip, we're going to go ahead and start adding more detail to the rocks.